What's going on, everyone? Juicebags here, and welcome back to some Dungeon Defenders 2 and another quick tutorial. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Omega Waves, and more importantly, we're going to be talking about the effect of stacking anti-mods. What I mean by this is using multiple anti-mods on the same defense, so using an anti-orc, an anti-chaos, and an anti-mini-boss, or an anti-melee, an anti-mini-boss, and an anti-orc, or whichever the three you choose. Now, these are exceptionally helpful in Omega Waves, and it's important to understand how these anti-mods affect or interact with each other. Now, first things first, just for ease of math, let's say you have a defense that does 1,000 damage, say once per second. So it's hitting once per second for 1,000 damage. We're not even going to take crits into consideration yet, just looking at the base math. Now let's say you had 3 anti-mods that all worked with that lane, that each one provided an additional 50%. So that's 50%, say, melee damage, 50%, say, frost damage, and 50% whatever else. Anyway, say you have 3 50% mods that stack upon each other. So if you're looking at this, you would think you're going to be getting 150% bonus damage. Now that would be true if anti-mods stacked in an additive fashion. However, they do not. They do indeed stack in a multiplicative fashion, meaning that that first anti-mod starting at the top is going to give you an additional 50% damage. So say with that first mod in place, your defense that's hitting for 1,000 is now going to hit for 1,500. Well, when that second 50% comes into a place, it's 50% of the 1,500. So with that second anti-mod in effect, it's that defense that normally hits for 1,000 is now going to be hitting for 2,250. And then when you get to that third 50%, it's working off of that 2,250, or that same defense is now going to hit for 3,375. This is how you're seeing these big numbers, and a lot of people, particularly with frost lanes in the mix and fire damage, are not realizing exactly where these big numbers on like Fishers or Fire Ramsters or Flamars is coming from, and it's because of the multiplication involved with anti-mod stacking. Now let's say, for example, this was an Omega Wave. Now, my personal favorite, without a doubt, is anti-mini-boss, anti-melee, and anti-chaos. I use lightning strike auras very regularly and very effectively on onslaught floors, well up to 200 plus. And then if I have a spellbreaker lane, of course the natural go-to is going to be cannonballs. Now say you have a lane full of Thorks, the natural go-to there would be cannonballs as well, because we don't want Thork disabling our auras. However, in most cases, I am generally using a Lightning Strike Aura to clear out these Omega Waves. So, anti-mini-boss, anti-melee, and anti-chaos. Now, the reason I chose those 3, first off, you need anti-mini-boss, that is the Omega Wave killer, so that's going to be in every one of them. Then I threw anti-melee in the mix because melee itself is going to be the majority of bosses, so that's going to cover most of the bosses that are going to come out. And then anti-chaos, because the bosses I personally seem to have a problem with most frequently are the chaos bosses. So the chaos enemies being Skarnash, Nash, Gorbstock, Thork, those are all chaos enemies as well as being a boss. When we look at, say, Skarnash or Nash, Nash covers all 3 of these. So Nash is a mini-boss, Nash is a melee mob, and Nash is a chaos mob. This means that all 3 of these mods are going to stack in fashion just as I would like to see them to burn Nash away to nothingness. Now let's take a look at the lane itself. For the most part, my goal is always to get as many Lightning Strike auras in as I can. So let's say I go with a 4 stack of Lightning Strike auras, just like that. Now, of course, we got the sweet spot in the middle where all 4 Lightning Strikes are attacking. However, we got double coverage through the majority of the rest of the lane. Now, what is the single biggest thing you could add to this lane to help out in this situation where it is an Omega Wave. That would without a doubt, if it can be used, to add in crowd control. So if it's an enemy that can be slowed, your very first thing that I personally would always do is throw in a Frostbite Tower. This is going to provide crowd control to the mobs, and in addition to that, there is the Frosty Power Shard, which is going to add additional defense power to each of these Lightning Strike auras. Now, we know that we have at least 200 DU to spend on each lane. As we see, I've only spent 110, so we can continue to compound this lane and add even more. So the next realistic choice for me is to find a way to boost more power into these Lightning Strikes while also adding more crit damage. So I'm going to get that by way of Boost Aura. So using Frosty Power, a Boost Aura, and Lightning Strike auras, it just puts out an absolute absurd amount of damage when you look at the crit damage available and the anti-boss stacking. Of course, you would always want to get your Lightning Strike auras upgraded and not really worry about the rest. However, in this particular situation right here, we've only spent 150 DU on the lane, which means we sold everything else in this area, and we're able to sink all of our mana in DU just into this setup. Now, the amount of damage that this is providing is absolutely absurd. Let's take a look at it. With this situation, just one Lightning Strike aura with the Boost Aura and with Frosty Power on top of it, it is critting for 31 million damage. Now, if we go back and we look at that anti-mod, once again, we're going to start off with anti-mini-boss, 44.83% additional damage to mini-bosses. This means that that 31 million crit is now going to be a 45 million, almost 46 million crit. Now, let's say this is a Nash lane, or let's say it is a Gorbstock lane, as Gorbstock really likes to march through and Gorbstock can be slowed. We're going to get that anti-melee on top of it. Now, this is going to turn that 31 million crit that got the anti-mini-boss boost is now going to get an anti-melee boost on top of it, and the crits from this tower are going to be 69 million damage and change, just dishing it out. Now, of course, remember, Gorbstock is also a chaos enemy, so we're going to do another 60% on top of that, and that is going to take the crits from each one of these Lightning Strike auras all the way up to 111 million. Now, that has a chance of going off every second, so even when you get to the floors, which I haven't even made it to yet, where bosses are going to have over 1 billion health, at 111 million crits times 4 opportunities to do so, these bosses are going to just melt just like butter. So always take anti-mod stacking into consideration when building out for your Omega Waves. Now remember, any single target, preferably a low DU cost single target defense like Lightning Strike auras, of course, cannonballs as I already mentioned, the snakes from the Mystic are a great choice. Any of these can just be spammed in the lane so that you get tons and tons of towers attacking. Not necessarily with the snakes, of course, as more than one won't attack the same target. However, a snake can be added in addition with this same type of mod setup. Now, I'm actually going to do a hero spotlight or a defense spotlight on my anti-mini-boss snakes here in the near future, but it's using a setup very, very similar to this. Always take that anti-mod stacking into consideration though, not only on the Omega Waves, but also on just any of your regular builds. So if you look at most Frost lanes, for example, what's everyone's major complaint with Frost lanes? For me personally, it's Frost Orcs, no doubt. So in that situation, I could use Anti-Frost and Anti-Orc. It's going to provide that Anti-Frost bonus to all of the other Frost mobs in the lane. However, it's going to hit the Anti-Orcs particularly hard. If I wanted to just go ham, I could add Anti-Melee in there as well, or Anti-Ranged for that matter, and it's going to apply to those enemies that are either melee or ranged. So hopefully this video helps everyone understand the importance of anti-stacking and exactly how it does stack, as it can without a doubt save the day for you in Dungeon Defenders 2 and particularly on Omega Waves. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget it is Friday, so right after Trendy Friday Fun over on Twitch, I'll be going live at 1 p.m. Pacific time for some Dungeon Defenders 2 fun over on twitch.tv. So thank you once again, and I will see you next time around. Take it easy.